Happy New Year, everyone. Happy 2026. Welcome to The Ordinary Effect, the stuff we all notice but rarely talk about. And today, kicking off the new year, perhaps I'm going to help you with some of your New Year's resolutions as I explore why we're so quick to tear good things down. Jealousy, negativity, and the ordinary ways it shows up. There's a moment I've started noticing more and more lately, and perhaps once you notice it, it will again be hard for you to stop seeing it. It's that tiny pause when someone shares something good. Not perfect, not life-changing, just good. And instead of the room leaning in, it subtly leans back. Not loudly, not aggressively, just enough. Enough for the response to turn into a qualifier. Enough for the tone to shift. Enough for someone to say, yeah, but. And the thing is, it's not always cruel. Sometimes it's wrapped in logic. Sometimes it's framed as realism. Sometimes it sounds like intelligence. But if you sit with it for a second, you start to realize what's actually happening. We've become incredibly good at tearing things down, especially when those things remind us of something we don't have. And we don't usually call it jealousy. We call it being informed. We call it being skeptical. We call it not buying into the hype. But jealousy doesn't always look like envy. Sometimes it looks like subtraction. You can see this play out in big conversations, and you can see it play out in very small ones too. Take remote work. For a brief moment, globally, we accidentally ran one of the largest social experiments in modern history. Across countries, cultures, industries, we learned things we'd argued about for decades in real time. We learned that fewer commutes meant cleaner air. Cities literally quieted down. Emissions dropped faster than people said was possible. We learned that productivity didn't collapse the way we were warned it would. In many cases, it improved. Meetings became shorter. People worked more intentionally. But the quieter lessons mattered just as much. People slept more. Parents saw their kids. Folks who hadn't been stretched thin finally had a little breathing room. People with anxiety found work days more manageable. Entire lives stopped revolving around traffic. Was it perfect? No, of course not. Some jobs couldn't adapt. Some people struggled. Some teams needed better structure. But here's the interesting part. Instead of asking how to make it better, instead of asking how to expand access, instead of asking what we could keep and what we could improve, the dominant response has become, take it away. And that's where the emotional undercurrent starts to show. Because for people whose jobs couldn't go remote, or whose lives didn't get easier, or whose stress didn't ease, watching others benefit didn't feel inspiring. It felt unfair. And instead of saying, how do we make this more equitable? The response has shifted to, then no one should have it. That's not a policy argument. That's an emotional one. It's the same pattern you see in much smaller, more ordinary moments. Someone wins tickets to a game, or a concert, or gets access to something special. Instead of, that's awesome, the response becomes, must be nice, which sounds harmless until you really listen to it. Must be nice isn't usually about the thing, It's about the distance between what someone has and what you don't. You could see this play out perfectly during the Taylor Swift Eras Tour. There was a lottery system. Was it flawless? No. People were frustrated. People were disappointed. People didn't get tickets they desperately wanted. That disappointment was real. But here's the part we didn't talk about, honestly. The system wasn't unfair to some people. It was imperfect for everyone. Everyone entered the same lottery. Everyone faced the same odds. No one was guaranteed anything. And yet, the frustration didn't land on chance. It landed on the people who won. Suddenly, those fans weren't just fans anymore. They became symbols of unfairness, of privilege, of a broken system. Not because they cheated, but because they were visible. And instead of saying, "I'm disappointed I didn't get tickets," the conversation became, "This whole thing is rigged and wrong." That's a subtle shift, but it matters. Disappointment says this hurts. Jealousy says this shouldn't exist. And once you see the difference, you start seeing it everywhere. Someone buys a nicer car. Suddenly, it's wasteful. Someone moves into a better home. Suddenly, they're out of touch. Someone gets an opportunity. Suddenly, it must be undeserved. Not always, but often. And what's really happening underneath all of this isn't hatred, it's exhaustion. People feel squeezed. They feel behind. They feel like effort doesn't pay the way it used to. And when someone else's win appears in front of them, that feeling needs somewhere to go. So it goes outward. Social media makes this worse. Platforms don't reward generosity. They reward certainty, snark, being the first person to say, "Actually." Optimism looks naive online. Curiosity looks weak. Enjoyment looks suspicious. So tearing things down becomes a performance, a way to signal intelligence, a way to prove you're not fooled. And slowly, we stop asking better questions. We stop asking, how could this work better? We stop asking, what can we learn from this? We stop asking, how do we make good things more accessible? Instead, we default to why this shouldn't exist at all. And here's where this loops back to the beginning. That moment, the pause when someone shares something good, that hesitation didn't come from nowhere. It came from a culture that's trained us to reduce instead of expand, to subtract instead of build. And as the new year begins, maybe the most meaningful resolution isn't about productivity or discipline or optimization. Maybe it's about noticing that pause, that moment before we say, yeah, but, the moment before we minimize, the moment before we tear something down just to protect ourselves from feeling left out. Not because we shouldn't pretend everything is perfect, but because not every good thing needs to be interrogated into silence. Sometimes allowing something to exist, even imperfectly, is the more generous, more human response. And maybe that's how we enter a new year a little lighter. Not by having more, not by winning more, but by letting ourselves and each other enjoy what is. That's not naive. That's choosing not to let jealousy quietly run the room. This is The Ordinary Effect. The stuff we all notice but rarely talk about. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Guido Perino. Happy New Year. I hope you subscribe if you haven't already. Take care.